Okay, so welcome back to my channel. So this is going to be a recap of Netflix, The Haunting of Bly Manor, Season 1, Episode 7, Two-Face, Part 2. Okay, so it picks up where it left off with them in the attic. You know, the way Episode 6 ended is with Miles/Peter hitting Dani in the back of the head with something, knocking her out. So now she's coming to, and you can kind of hear them talking about, oh, she's coming to, or was she tucked away, and da-da-da-da. So you have Flora and Miles talking. And so, of course, she's confused. She don't know what the hell's going on. She's now tied up, and they're telling her not to be afraid, da-da-da-da. And so they're talking to someone, or talking to a few people, and then they was like, well, maybe if you came and talked to her yourself, she would be less afraid. And so Rebecca and Peter revealed themselves. So of course she's sitting there like, okay, what the hell, what exactly is going on? And so now they're trying to decide what they're going to do with her, because they don't want her to mess up their plans, which will be unveiled later in the episode. And so they're trying to decide what they're going to do. And so Rebecca and her, they kind of make eye contact, and you can kind of see that Rebecca, she's kind of faltering a little bit throughout the episode. And so Flora is saying, she's asking Rebecca if Rebecca can tuck her away so that she would be less afraid. And so Flora was asking her, like, what's your favorite memory, and you know, this whole thing. And Rebecca's saying, well, honey, it doesn't work that way, and I'm not sure. The thing is, I think you have to know something about that person, or had to have some experiences with that person, I'm not really sure. But she was like, well, honey, it doesn't work that way. And so Rebecca starts hearing something, and it distracts her, while Peter is talking to them about what they need to do, what they're going to do, or what they might do with Dani. And so she gets distracted, and eventually she walks off. Peter runs behind her. She disappears. And then, of course, Dani is still sitting there like, okay, what the hell is about to happen? What are they going to do to me? What exactly is going on here? So, Peter's talking to Miles about the plan, how they need to stick to the plan, and then he hears a knock at the door, and he's telling Miles, okay, I need you to say, it's probably Hannah, I need you to say exactly what I need you to say. And Miles is like, what are you talking about? I don't hear a knock. And so the knock continues, and he turns, and next you know, he's opening the door to his apartment, flat, whatever they want to call it. And there's this woman standing there, and then, you know, they talk a little bit before he reveals that she's his mother, and she's talking about, you know, I guess she got a clean bill of health. They thought she had cancer, or she had cancer, and now she's in remission, something to that effect. And she said how she doesn't have any money, and, you know, what do you want her to do? It's either, you know, she either had to come there to try to get money, or go back to his father. And he's like, okay, well, he's sitting here. So now they're going back and forth, and she basically said she was going to blackmail him, that if he didn't get money for her, that she would tell his employer, Henry Wingrave, about his juvenile records and da-da-da-da-da. And so you see that the reason he was stealing the necklace was for her, because she had blackmailed him. So, you know, he felt like he didn't have any other choice. So then we moved to Rebecca, and she's now sitting at the table with Hannah and the police officer, and Hannah is telling the police officer about how Peter stole some things from the house, some things went missing. And then he was like, oh, that's not all he did. And Henry Wingrave also filed a report saying that he stole $200,000. This is when they both found out that he had stole about the money being missing. And then the cop started questioning Rebecca, and she was like, he didn't say anything. We had plans to leave, and he told me that he, had plans for us to go to America and, to live in America, And he's asking her, like, drilling her, like, and he didn't tell you anything. And, that's amazing, for you guys to be so much in love. And he leaves you behind. And then she has this emotional, like, he did not leave me behind, right? And so, she's now sitting at the table by herself. Both Hannah and the officer are now gone. The next thing you see is Miles, and she's, talking to Miles, and she's like, no, everything is fine. And then he starts telling her that Peter didn't leave her, that he would never leave her, and that, he's still there, and she's kind of confused, and, basically he's basically reassuring her, and he told me to tell you that, he's still here, and she I guess felt reassured by that, even though she didn't see him. And then Miles runs off. She walks through the door. She's now in her second memory. Owen and Hannah were in the kitchen. He's talking about making a cake and about the batter, and he's kind of going through this whole biology lesson, like if you use a mixer, then that kind of does something to the molecules of the bread. Now, it was just the whole conversation, right? And so she's kind of like ribbing him about it. Eventually, Jamie walks in, and she's like, okay, the food, nothing's ready yet. And she was like, oh, well, no, because he doesn't want to use a mixer. So they both start trying to messing with Owen a little bit. And so then they turn and asked, because at this point, they're all the way, obviously, at this point, they know that Peter is gone, missing, whatever the case may be. And, they know that she's kind of feeling down about it, because at this point, they all know that they were in a relationship together. And so Hannah invites her, if she wants to stay for tea, and she decides she doesn't. She decides she wants to go out and get some fresh air. Eventually, Jamie walks out to talk to her, and she was like, what, did you come out here to gloat? Because if you did, I really don't feel like it. And Jamie was like, well, no, I believe it or not, I do actually, feel bad for you. But at the same time, I think this is a great opportunity for you. You've always wanted to be a barrister, and, being with Peter was going to, basically she saw it as derailing Rebecca's life and her plans. And she was like, maybe now you should take this opportunity to contact Henry and to see if he will give you that pupillage that you need in order for you to move forward in your career. And, believe it or not, I do feel sorry for you. And if there's anything that you need, by all means, you can, come to me, you can ask me, and I'll do what I can to help. And, she walked off. So Rebecca's now back in her room, and Peter now appears to her. She's pissed. She's like, what happened to you? And why, what's going on with this money? And they're saying that, and he's trying to tell her, to keep her voice down, and people might hear them. And she was like, well, good, maybe that's a good thing. And then he eventually tells her that, or at least he shows her that he asked her to hold her hand out. And before he, tried to touch her, he said, I want you to remember that this is the only thing that will keep me from you. And so he ends up putting, like he was going to touch her hand. And of course, his hand went straight through hers. And so now she's like shocked. Okay, what is going on? Now she realized that he is, in fact, dead. And so now she's kind of going through the motions. And, eventually, she's supposed to be teaching the kids, but she's so deep in her own stuff that she really, she was really any use to them at all. So later that evening, she's still sitting in the class. So Hannah comes in to talk to her, and because at this point they all think that he's missing. At this point, she's the only person that knows that he's dead. So, and they never really cared for him anyway. So they are not emotional. They're not attached to him or any emotions. Anything like that. And so she was basically like, they started talking. She noticed that they were working on fractions, and then she started talking about, the connection between fractions and relationships is that they say for the amount of time that you guys were together, it takes half that time for you to get over the individual. And Rebecca kind of got offended, like maybe some things are not easy just to get over. And so I guess Hannah was like, oh, okay. So she ends up leaving her to her thoughts, right? And so she ends up going, end up going up to the forbidden hallway, going to Lord and Lady Wingrave's room, and then of course Peter is there, and she's talking about, okay, she wants him to tell her what happened, and he's not ready to tell her what happened. And then she goes to touch him and realizes that she couldn't, and then she starts freaking out, and he's trying to tell her to keep her voice down because, somebody might hear her. And then I think he was trying to grab her, but he ends up pushing her or something, I don't know. And then the next thing you know, she stands up and she pulls the cover off the mirror, and he is actually inside her, like he's taking possession of her. That's why she's kind of looking at herself in the mirror. And then he kind of pops out, and they're both confused about like what exactly just happened. And so he hears the knocking again, and she's like asking him like, what did you do to me? What happened? Where did I go? Da, 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 da. And then next he's back in the apartment. He opens the door. His mom is standing there, and this whole thing plays over again. So Rebecca's coming downstairs. Jamie is like doing this beautiful flower arrangement in the foyer, and she was like, oh, I haven't seen you all day, and how are you doing? And Rebecca was kind of short with her, kind of frying her face all up, and then she was like, well, did you call him? And she was like, what are you talking about? So, did you call Henry and asked him about the pupillage? And she said she did. And she said, okay, well, what did he say? She said that he would consider it. And of course, Jamie was like, considerate? What a prick. Like, he owes you, he owes you. And so Rebecca kind of shrugged and, walked off. And obviously that kind of struck a nerve with Jamie, because she was like, she knows how important this is to Rebecca. And so the nonchalant like attitude she had, kind of like, Jamie was like, okay, are you okay? And she was like, oh, I'm fine. So now you see Rebecca walking down the pathway to the gate, and then you realize why her behavior was so off. It was because Peter was inside her, and they were trying to see if he was inside her, if he would be able to leave through her. And they realized that was not the case. And so, as soon as she hit the line to cross the gate, he popped out, she fell over, and they're both kind of figuring out, okay, well, what's the next step? So they're all in the kitchen, they're cooking, they're having a good time, and she's kind of off to herself, deep in thought. And because since that day, she hadn't seen or spoken to Peter. And so, she's kind of going through the motions. You see Miles and Flora are, fighting over something, and she can't even be bothered to interfere to even break them up. She's just so in her own space. And so, she goes back to her room, and you can see Peter in the reflection behind her in the mirror. She turns around, eventually sees him. She's pissed. She was like, he's been gone for a week. Where did you go? Da, da, da. And he's telling her that how he's learned a lot. And, he's just been watching, what's been going on. And he's always been there. And then he's telling her that he's found a way for them to be together. But she's going to have to trust him. And he thinks the key is for her she has to invite him in. And she's like confused, like, well, what do you mean? He said, well, do you trust me? And they go through this whole thing. And she, allows him in. And next thing you know, the memory of them, they're back in Lord and Lady's room. She's wearing the fur coat, and how that whole thing played out. But the next thing you see is she's outside, and she's standing there, and she's crying. And then you realize that she's standing by the lake. She walks into the lake, and then eventually goes under, but you realize that it's not her. He is in control of her body, and he has her, as Flora would say, tucked away. And so it's flashing between, and you can, unfortunately, while this is going on, he's actually seeing his body at the bottom of the lake. And so it's flashing between this and them, like, being kind of cozying and all in this nice moment, right, while this is going on. But eventually she realized something is off, something is different. And so she's kind of like kind of looking around, and then she sits up in the bed, and she's trying, you can see now that he's gone, and she's trying to realize, and then she realized that he left. He's gone. He did not he did not explain to her. He intentionally omitted whatever the hell his plan was, and he got her into this situation, and basically he's responsible for her dying. So while this is going on, she kind of comes to herself, and she realized that she's underwater, but by then it's too late. She's already drowning, and she can't really get out. And so you can see it's flashing back between her in the water and her in the bed. You can see like the water above her. She's like trying to figure out, what's going on with her. And then, she's struggling obviously at this point, and it was hard to see. And so it's the next day, and then you hear all this screaming and this wailing, and you're trying to figure out, okay, who was that? Like, what's going on? And then you realize it's her. She's see her body floating in the water, and she knows that she's dead, and she's completely distraught because she did not obviously agree to be killed, murdered, or whatever. Or in this case, it was considered a suicide. And so then you see Flora, because of course we already knew that Flora was the person that found her. So Flora is standing there. Jamie walks up, and she's like, well, Flora, what are you doing out here? And then she looks over, and then she could see Rebecca floating in the water. She grabs Flora and takes her back to the house. And so they flash back to the fur coat memory, and then you can kind of see that she's like, okay, wait a minute, what's going on here? And then she's like, why are we back in this memory? I don't like this memory. Why are we here? And then he picks up the camera, and he's like, I just want you to see how beautiful I, which is what he said when he initially picked up the camera to start taking photos of her. And she's like, I don't want to be here. And he realized that she started to realize that she's dead, and he lied to her, and basically he's responsible for her dying, and he's just a shitty person, right? And so she's like, why are we back here? I don't like this memory. And she, she's angry, and this is not what we agreed on, and you lied to me, and I trusted you, And then they take that infamous photo again of her in the fur coat, but now they look remarkably different, of course, because at this point they're both dead. And so she realized she is obviously hurt and confused, and he's telling her that he has a plan, and he knows a way out. And then he hears the knocking again, and while she's going, she's going off on him, like, what are you talking about? What is the plan? What's going to happen to me? What are you talking about? And he keeps getting distracted by the noise, and he then eventually looks over, and he is back in his apartment again. It's playing over. And then he starts talking to his mom about, how she knew what his dad did to him, and, and the other kids that would come over to the house, and how she let it happen. And he was trying to figure out, like, why do I keep coming here? Why does everybody else they go to these nice, pleasant memories, but why do I keep coming to this hell? And she's like, well, maybe this is where you're supposed to be. And he was like, you're responsible for me dying, because this is when you find out that, he's telling her that he died, because he didn't come out and say he was stealing the necklace, but she was responsible for him dying. And how does it feel to know that you're responsible for your son's death? And she just looked at him and was like, son, I don't even know that you're dead, which she doesn't. And then he kind of like went back to himself. He's now back in the attic. And he's at this time, while he's distracted, Flora and Miles are trying to untie Dani, but they weren't fast enough. Rebecca returns, and he's saying that we need to do this now. We're running out of time. And she was like, well, maybe we need to give them more time. And he's like, no, we don't have any more time. And so Miles and Flora are like, well, what are you talking about? I don't understand. And she's, Dani's sitting there because she's still trying to figure out what are they going to do? What is he talking about? And so he's telling them about how, it's going to be fine. And, they don't have any more time. And they were talking, he said, remember we were talking about the safe house, and, how they're going to be locked away with their parent, they'll be tucked away as, Flora would say with their parents and this happy memory and this whole thing, and they're both kind of scared, like, I don't know if I want to do this. And you can see that Rebecca is apprehensive. She just really doesn't want to do it. And then he grabs the no name entity and pulls it out, and it was like, this is what's going to happen to us if we don't do something. So he was like, this is what happens to everybody who dies at Bly Manor. Of course, at this point, we still don't know who this person is. And he's saying, is this what you want to happen to us? And they're saying, no, we don't. But they're scared. And he's saying that you just have to, it's going to be painless. He's really, trying to convince them to go to do this. You have to think of us, and like, you have to allow us in. And so he sent Flora over to Rebecca, and he's still telling now Miles is still afraid, and it's this whole thing. And eventually they do. So both Rebecca and Peter disappear. The kids both collapse on the floor. Dani is now terrified because she thinks maybe that they're dead or something. I don't know. Because she's still tied up. She can't really do anything to help them. They stand up with the children of the corn-esque selves, and they're like, oh, it worked. And what are we going to do with her? And he's saying that he's going to, he'll take care of it when he comes back. And then there's a knock, because there's a knock at the door, and it's Hannah. She's looking for everybody. She can't find Dani. She can't find Flora or Miles. So she's kind of looking around. She's calling for them, and he goes to, I guess, take care of Hannah, right? And so, okay, I have two questions as we get towards the end of this. So he tells her that he has something he wants to show her, and for some odd reason, she follows this kid. It's the middle of the night, and she follows him out into the woods instead of telling him, okay, no, you should be in bed. I don't understand that. And then he takes her to the well, and then he's like, why don't you just stop this whole charade and just look down the well and go to some happy memory, And then she was, she didn't want to do it. And then he was like, okay, just, I'm tired of you just prancing and bopping around here like you're somebody. And he's like talking to her all crazy. And I'm trying to figure out, like, why she letting him talk to her like that. We understand that this is Peter, but Miles as a child. And I was like, well, why is she allowing this boy to talk to her like that and order her around? Because eventually she did go and look down the well, and she did see herself. Excuse me. And then it flashes back to her in the kitchen where she was interviewing. Excuse me. It flashes to her back in the kitchen when she was interviewing Owen. And then she realized, and she eventually admitted that she was dead. Finally, it was like, okay, finally she's realized what's going on. And then he disappeared, and now she's just standing there. She's just sitting there by herself. Flora goes over, and she takes the tie off of Dani's face. And then you see Rebecca. And she was like, well, I did exactly what you said, and so Rebecca didn't take over Flora. And so now you want to untie her to get her out of the house. And so you see them running down the stairs. They're running out of the house. And then for some reason, Flora flashed on her like, I don't know what's going on. I don't want to play this game anymore. So she's yelling. Dani's trying to keep her quiet because she's trying to keep Miles, aka Peter, at bay, way so they can get away. And Flora's like, no, I don't want to play this game anymore. So she's screaming. Eventually, Dani was like, you know what? She turns to run away. Unfortunately, she came face to face with whatever this entity is that killed Peter. And this thing is grabbing her by the throat and dragging her off. And that's how this episode ends. So I'm not exactly sure why, like I said, I'm not sure why Hannah listened to Niles. Why am I calling that boy Niles all of a sudden? Miles. I'm not sure why she listened to Miles. And I'm not exactly sure why Flora flashed on Dani like that when the whole point was for them to get away. So I'm confused. Okay, so I'm going to end this here, and I will talk to you guys later.